The Walking Dead, a show that has now been going on for more than a decade, has finally just finished wrapping up its final season. And although not everyone is happy with how it ended, it still had a better ending than Game of Thrones, which, come to think of it, isn't that hard to achieve. Personally, I stopped watching the show after the death of Shiva. The fact that 10 walkers were able to kill a fully grown tigress was just way too much for me to handle. In today's pilot episode of Scientifically Impossible, we will be debunking the walkers from The Walking Dead. We will be analyzing the origins of the wildfire virus, the pathophysiology, behavior of walkers, and neurophysiology of walkers to conclude why the creation of walkers is scientifically impossible. Let's first start with the origins of the virus and pathophysiology of the virus. Not much is known about the wildfire virus, as it has been purposely shrouded in secrecy by Kirkman. What we do know is that it travels throughout the air and that everyone is infected. This means the virus can replicate very efficiently within the body. The virus is ever only able to take over the host body when the host dies. The virus will then reanimate the host upon death. The reanimation time depends on how the host died. The virus doesn't present any symptoms in the host when they are alive. Walkers that are infected can often kill a healthy individual with a single bite or scratch, but this may not be due to the virus itself. When an individual is bitten by a walker, the skin is broken and any bacteria present on the walker's teeth can enter the bloodstream. The bloodstream is a sterile environment, and bacteria that is present in the blood leads to septicemia, which means blood poisoning by bacteria. This is what happens when the appendix bursts due to appendicitis, mass leak of bacteria into a sterile environment. This triggers an immune response and causes a fever, which is evident with what we see when someone is bitten in the show. They begin to sweat and exhibit fever-like symptoms. It should be known that the fever is not the cause of the virus, but rather a protective mechanism by the body, particularly the immune system. The most likely method which causes death of a bitten individual is septic shock. Septic shock is due to bacteria releasing toxins, which damage tissues that then release many mediators that will activate a special type of cell called mast cells. Mast cells are generally activated due to an allergic response and release histamine. This histamine is what causes the runny nose you would associate with an allergic reaction to something like pollen. That is why antihistamines are prescribed during the allergy season. The problem with histamine release due to septic shock is that there is a mass release of histamine and a mass mast cell activation. Histamine will also dilate blood vessels and make them more permeable, which means blood vessel contents are more likely to leak out. Fluid leak from blood vessels will decrease blood volume, which will result in a decrease of mean arterial pressure or a drop in blood pressure. As blood pressure decreases, less blood will reach vital organs such as the heart and brain, which will eventually cause death. Now, let's look at the walkers' behavior. The walkers are only driven by one thing, which is to eat. They display aggressive behavior towards anything that is alive. Since we know that walkers have an uncontrolled drive to eat, we can then delve into what is going on in their brains. Appetite in humans is due to the release of certain hormones. The hormones associated with metabolism are ghrelin, leptin, and insulin. Ghrelin is released from the stomach and is released when the stomach is empty or unstretched. When the stomach is stretched, ghrelin release slows down or stops. Leptin is another hormone released from fat cells. It helps you feel satiated after a meal. Insulin is released after a meal and helps to reduce food intake and appetite, while also decreasing blood glucose sugar levels. People with type 2 diabetes have formed a resistance to their own insulin, or do not endogenously produce enough insulin to maintain normal blood glucose levels. This is why type 2 diabetics have a higher blood glucose level. So the neurocircuitry of metabolism would still be active in a walker, and so the hypothalamus must be active in a walker. A region in the hypothalamus called the arc contains two types of neurons which regulate appetite. AGRP neurons and POMC neurons are the two types of neurons that act as gas paddles and brakes of metabolism. AGRP neurons are activated when there's low food intake. Ghrelin binds to these neurons, and once activated, they promote activities which promote food-seeking behaviors. POMC neurons are activated when satiated and decrease food intake. This is a cross-section of the arc in the hypothalamus. Once ghrelin is released, it travels through the bloodstream and passes through the blood-brain barrier to bind to this receptor on the AGRP neurons. This causes an activation of AGRP neurons, which promotes food-seeking behaviors in an individual. This also increases hepatic glucose levels. Now, the other major neuron which controls metabolism are the POMC neurons. These are activated by insulin binding to the insulin receptor. When these are activated, food-seeking behavior decreases and hepatic glucose production also decreases. People with mutations to the MCR4 receptor are likely to have obesity as they are unable to stop eating, as alpha MSH cannot bind to the MCR4 receptor on the PVN neurons. This causes them to always be hungry and always have AGRP neurons activated. Much like people with obesity, the walkers are never satiated, and they will eat themselves until they are unable to move. This would suggest that they have excessive AGRP neuron firing, which is why they seek food so often. This would describe the walkers' constant desire to eat. They would have blocked POMC neuron firing and would not be able to stop themselves. In earlier episodes, walkers were seen opening doors and doing other activities that they had done in their past lives. This illustrates that the walkers still had a functioning prefrontal cortex and hippocampal areas. These regions of the brain are vital for the formation and storage of memories and personality. Complete removal of the hippocampus regions will cause complete memory loss in an individual, but since the walkers were able to remember things from their past lives, these regions must have been preserved. However, the episode regarding the CDC contradicts these assumptions. The scientist from the CDC says the prefrontal cortex is completely destroyed and only the brainstem region is activated once the walkers are reanimated. Complete destruction of the prefrontal cortex would result in some memory loss, and thus the walkers would not be able to remember anything from their past lives. Without activation of the motor cortex, complex motions such as walking upstairs would be very difficult for walkers, and their gait would be slurred and appear dragged. They would lose their ability to sense pain and would not be able to smell anything. Smell transduction occurs via the olfactory bulb, which will not be present in walkers. So Glenn and Rick, walking past the walkers with guts on them, would have zero purpose since the walkers are unable to smell. Now, before you say the walkers can see them, let's have a look at vision. Vision is a complex process that requires the presence of the occipital lobe, which is located at the back of the brain. Hits to the back of the head can be very deadly and cause vision loss due to the damage to this lobe. Since only the brainstem is activated, only cranial nerves are activated and regions of the brain associated with vision will not be activated, so the walkers will also be blind. Finally, let's dissect the blood metabolism and musculature of the walkers. Blood is the key to life. Without it, your organs will starve and you will cease to live. The walkers do not have a functioning heart, and so blood circulation is not possible. Blood carries oxygen and nutrients throughout the body. Organs take up oxygen and release carbon dioxide as a byproduct of metabolism. This carbon dioxide must be removed from the body, otherwise the blood's pH levels can be altered, resulting in acidosis, which is a low pH in the blood. The walkers bleed a dark black substance. This suggests that hemoglobin is not present in blood, which means no oxygen is being transported via blood and organs are not functioning. Since the walkers' organs are essentially dead, they have no way to intake energy, and any food they eat will just pass straight through them, as they are unable to absorb nutrients from the food. Muscles, particularly skeletal muscles, have high metabolic demand If they are left unfed, they will begin to atrophy, which means shrink, and waste away. Without muscles, walkers will not be able to move and will fall. In conclusion, there is no virus that is found in nature that can cause reanimation. The closest thing to creating a zombie in nature is a fungus which can hijack an insect's central nervous system and control it. Thankfully, it only affects insects. After death, a human simply cannot come back and endlessly walk around. The walkers from The Walking Dead would just collapse into a blind corpse. Even if they were somehow, through some magic, were able to walk, they would be skeletons at best, and you or I would not struggle to dispatch a few with our bare hands. They would not even have the strength to bite down with their jaws to cut through our skin. Therefore, the walkers from The Walking Dead are scientifically impossible.